Welcome to Dr. Dan's channel, where we dissect the complex forces shaping our world. Today, we are not just observing a news story, we are witnessing a tectonic shift in international relations. A moment where the established rules of global power are being tested and perhaps rewritten. For over 3 centuries, the world has operated on a fundamental principle: the sovereignty of nations. The idea that within its own borders, a state is the ultimate authority, free from external interference. But what happens when that principle collides with accusations of criminality on a global scale? Today, we are watching a question that has haunted modern geopolitics for decades return in the most explosive way possible. Can a superpower indict, hunt, and extract a sitting head of another sovereign state and call it justice? This isn't a theoretical debate. It's a live operation, grounded in a multi-million-dollar bounty and a U.S. Department of Justice indictment that names Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro as the leader of a narco-terrorist conspiracy. The accusation is that he, along with his inner circle, weaponized cocaine trafficking, not just for profit but as a tool of foreign policy against the United States. The U.S. government isn't just alleging corruption, it's alleging that the very apparatus of the Venezuelan state has been turned into a criminal enterprise. This action shatters a long-held, if sometimes violated, norm of international conduct, the immunity of a head of state from foreign prosecution. It's a line that, once crossed, is very difficult to uncross. Because what you are about to hear is not only about Venezuela. It's not even just about Nicolás Maduro. It's about a nation sitting atop the world's largest proven oil reserves, crippled by years of economic mismanagement, corruption, and crushing international sanctions. It's about a humanitarian crisis that has forced millions to flee their homes, creating instability across the entire region. This context is critical because it creates a fog of motives. Is this operation a righteous pursuit of a criminal, as the U.S. government claims? Or is it, as critics argue, the culmination of a long-standing policy of regime change, aimed at a government that has defied American interests for over 2 decades? Is it about drugs, or is it about oil, ideology, and control? It is about the precedent it sets. In international law, precedent isn't just about past court rulings. It's about the actions that nations take, and what those actions normalize for the future. When a country with the military and economic might of the United States declares that it has the right to unilaterally enforce its laws against the leader of another nation, it creates a new playbook. If the United States can strike, extract, and detain a sitting head of state, then the very concept of sovereign immunity is rendered conditional. It becomes a privilege granted by the powerful, not a right held by all. And in a world of rising geopolitical tensions, every rival power is taking notes. They are studying the legal justifications, the military logistics, the political fallout. They are learning. China is taking notes. Beijing, which has its own territorial ambitions and faces international criticism over its human rights record, is watching to see how far a superpower can go in pursuing its interests beyond its borders, under the banner of law enforcement. Russia is taking notes. The Kremlin, which has already demonstrated its willingness to act militarily in its near abroad and has faced its own share of international sanctions and accusations, is observing a playbook it might one day seek to emulate or counter. And every smaller nation, every middle power, every country that relies on the established rules of international order for its own protection, is asking the same unsettling question. If it happened there, why not here? If our leader falls out of favor with a global power, could we be next? Does our sovereignty only exist as long as it is convenient for others? Stay with me. This is a story with immense consequences, and understanding it requires us to move beyond the headlines and into the details. Because today, we are going to break down the entire anatomy of this crisis. First, we'll examine what Venezuela became under Nicolás Maduro, how a nation with such immense wealth descended into a failed state, and the evidence behind the U.S. indictment. Second, we will analyze the official justification from the United States. The legal framework it claims gives it the authority for such an unprecedented action. Third, we will explore the powerful counter-argument from critics, including many Democrats and foreign policy dissenters. who argue this was never about drugs, but about a decades-long policy of regime change. And finally, we will connect the dots and explore what this moment means for the future of global conflict. How this precedent could reshape the calculations for flashpoints like Taiwan and Ukraine, and redefine the very meaning of war and justice in the 21st century. This is not speculation. This is a deep dive into the public indictments, the declassified intelligence, the principles of international law, and the strategic doctrines of global powers. This is power, law, and precedent colliding in real time. It's a story about where the authority of one nation ends and the sovereignty of another begins. By the end of this video, you will not just know what is happening in Venezuela. You will understand the profound and far-reaching implications of this moment, and why it may reshape how nations justify the use of force for years and perhaps decades to come. To understand why this situation detonated, you have to understand what Venezuela has been living through for the better part of a generation. It's a story that begins not with Nicolas Maduro, but with his predecessor, Hugo Chávez. When Maduro came to power in 2013, he inherited a political project built by Chávez, charismatic, deeply polarizing, and almost entirely funded by an historic oil boom. Chávez called it the Bolivarian Revolution. It was a sweeping socialist agenda that poured billions into social programs, known as misiones, which lifted many out of poverty and provided healthcare and education to the poorest sectors of society. He nationalized key industries, from telecommunications to cement, and most critically, consolidated state control over the nation's vast oil reserves. For a time, with oil prices soaring above $100 a barrel, the project seemed to work. Venezuela became a regional power broker, challenging American influence and inspiring leftist movements across Latin America. But the foundation was fragile, built on a single commodity. The government's policies also alienated the business community and the middle class, creating deep, irreconcilable divisions that fractured the country. Then the boom ended. In 2014, global oil prices crashed. For Venezuela, it was a cataclysm. The state's income evaporated. The economy, already strained by price controls, currency manipulation, and declining production from underinvestment in the state oil company, PDVSA, didn't just buckle. It imploded. What followed was one of the worst economic collapses outside of wartime in modern history. Hyperinflation rendered the currency worthless. Basic goods, food, medicine, toilet paper, vanished from shelves. Hospitals became places people went to die, lacking even the most basic supplies like soap or antibiotics. As the economy disintegrated, the state hardened. The country became marked by fear. Facing massive protests, the Maduro government responded not with concessions, but with crackdowns. International human rights organizations and the UN have documented a pattern of repression, arbitrary detentions, torture allegations, and extrajudicial killings. The government deployed not just its official security forces, but also armed civilian groups, known as colectivos, to suppress dissent and maintain control in loyalist neighborhoods. A society emerged where survival could depend on your connections. Access to scarce food was managed through a state-run distribution system, which critics alleged was used to reward loyalty and punish dissent. Access to dollars, protection from crime, or the ability to navigate a collapsed bureaucracy often depended on political affiliation. And then came the exodus. Faced with hunger, violence, and a future that had evaporated, Venezuelans began to leave. At first it was a trickle, then a flood. Over 7 million people, more than 20% of the population, have fled the country. It is the largest refugee crisis in the Western Hemisphere, dwarfing others in recent memory. They walked across borders, crammed onto precarious boats, and scattered across the continent and the globe. This mass migration destabilized the entire region, overwhelming social services in neighboring Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, and turning Venezuela's internal crisis into a hemispheric pressure point. But here is the key. A humanitarian disaster, an economic collapse, and a refugee crisis, as profound as they are, do not automatically explain an American military operation. So what does? The official law enforcement architecture did not begin yesterday. It has been building for years. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice announced criminal charges against Nicolas Maduro and other current and former Venezuelan officials, framing the case around narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, corruption, and related offenses. Justice.gov. That matters because it becomes a ready-made justification. Not "we are invading," but "we are enforcing the law." So, in the U.S. government narrative, this is not a coup. It is a capture operation against a criminal defendant. But critics argue the moment you use military force inside a sovereign country, law enforcement becomes a label, not a limit. Now we move to the dissenters, because your MSNBC transcript captures the core Democratic critique in plain language. They argue the action was not necessary, not legal, and not properly briefed to Congress, with claims that it was about oil, minerals, and regime change, not narco-trafficking. Whether you agree or disagree, this becomes the political earthquake. If Congress was not adequately briefed, critics invoke war powers, oversight, and constitutional restraint. This is where the story widens, because if your own opposition believes the justification is pretext, then the question becomes, what is the real objective? To understand the pressure for intervention, we need to look beyond the official statements. In geopolitics, the stated reasons for action are often just the surface layer. Beneath them, you'll find a complex web of overlapping interests, a matrix of motives that drive policy behind the scenes. Let's separate these motives into 4 distinct yet interconnected buckets. Because this is how power actually operates, not in a straight line, but through a convergence of forces. The first, and perhaps most obvious, is oil and resources. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves on the planet. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Iran. The majority of this is extra-heavy crude located in the Orinoco Belt. For decades, the United States was Venezuela's #1 customer. Refineries along the U.S. Gulf Coast were specifically engineered to process this type of heavy, sour crude. The state-owned oil company, PDVSA, and its American subsidiary, Citgo, were deeply integrated into the American energy market. But as Venezuela's production collapsed under mismanagement and then crippling U.S. sanctions, that flow of oil dried up. This created a vacuum. The crisis isn't just about the presence of oil, it's about control over it, and who fills the void when a major supplier goes offline. For policymakers, securing a stable and friendly source of energy so close to home remains a powerful gravitational incentive. The second bucket is migration pressure. A nation's internal collapse rarely stays within its borders. Since 2015, over 7 million Venezuelans have fled the country, creating one of the largest displacement crises in the world. This mass exodus has placed an immense strain on neighboring countries like Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, overwhelming social services and fueling political tensions across the hemisphere. When a humanitarian crisis reaches this scale, it transforms. It ceases to be a purely domestic issue and becomes a regional security threat. For the United States and its allies, the goal of achieving stability in Venezuela is no longer just an abstract ideal. It's a direct security interest aimed at stemming the flow of people and preventing further destabilization of a critical region. The pressure from regional partners to do something becomes immense. Third, there is the classic dynamic of great power rivalry. As U.S. influence in Venezuela has waned, other global powers have stepped in. Russia has provided military support, including technical advisors and strategic bomber flights, treating Venezuela as a key geopolitical chessboard in the Western Hemisphere. China, meanwhile, has become Venezuela's largest creditor, securing its multi-billion-dollar loans with long-term oil delivery contracts. From a U.S. strategic perspective, This is the Monroe Doctrine's worst nightmare. The establishment of a potentially hostile foothold by strategic competitors just a 3-hour flight from Miami. The presence of Russian and Chinese influence isn't just a commercial or diplomatic issue. It's perceived as a direct challenge to America's historical dominance in its own backyard, raising the stakes far beyond Venezuela itself. Finally, the fourth bucket, domestic politics. Foreign policy is never conducted in a vacuum. It is often a performance for a domestic audience. Taking a tough stance on a foreign adversary can be a powerful tool, especially during an election cycle. It allows a leader to project strength, resolve, and decisiveness. In the context of Venezuela, being seen as the one who will act against a socialist regime or a narco-state plays powerfully with certain voter bases, particularly in key states like Florida, where there is a large and politically active diaspora from Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. The decision to intervene, or even just to threaten intervention, can become less about the foreign target and more about consolidating power and winning votes at home. It's a way for a leader to demonstrate they are in control on the world stage and in the national polls. But here is the hard truth, the fundamental rule of statecraft. In geopolitics, motives stack. They are never singular. It's never just about one thing. It can be drugs and oil, law and leverage, security and signaling. A humanitarian crisis can provide the public justification for an intervention that is privately motivated by access to resources. A great power rivalry can escalate a response to a migration issue, and domestic political calculations can determine the timing and intensity of it all. These four drivers, resources, migration, rivalry, and politics, are not mutually exclusive. They are reinforcing. They blend together, creating a powerful current pulling policymakers toward a specific course of action, even when the official narrative focuses on only one. Understanding this matrix is the key to understanding the entire conflict. Your transcript draws a historical parallel that will not go away. The United States has previously removed leaders and prosecuted them. The Noriega comparison matters not because history repeats perfectly, but because the logic repeats. Label the target criminal. Apply overwhelming force. Remove the leader. Justify it as justice. Critics argue this can slide into a doctrine. Might makes legality. Supporters counter, if a leader is allegedly tied to transnational crime and terror, then sovereignty should not be a shield. This is the moral collision at the heart of your video. Now we reach the global consequences your transcript raises directly. Taiwan. If regime removal is normalized, Beijing may claim it is merely applying the same logic in its own sphere of interest. Ukraine. If borders can be crossed for strategic necessity, Moscow can point and say, "You did it too." And that is why dissenters say this moment is bigger than Maduro. It reshapes the permission structure of the world. Supporters respond with a counter-argument. The US is not changing regimes, it is capturing an indicted narco-terrorist. Justice.gov. They argue that distinction matters, but rivals may not respect the distinction. They will borrow the method, not the nuance. Your transcript says it plainly, a mess. Because removing one leader does not automatically remove the networks beneath him. The state still has hardliners, security structures, and armed loyalists. Possible pathways, framed neutrally. 1. Rapid transition backed by international recognition. 2. Internal power struggle among remaining elites. 3. Fragmentation and violence if competing forces contest legitimacy. 4. Negotiated settlement under regional pressure if outside actors fear chaos. And here is the question that keeps viewers watching. If this operation was supposed to create stability, what if it creates the opposite? The official logic rests on a long-standing criminal case architecture, narco-terrorism, trafficking, and prosecution. So why did the United States move on Maduro? The dissenting logic says the real center of gravity is resources, leverage, and regime change, and that legality and oversight were bypassed. And the world is left with a final, unsettling truth. When powerful nations decide a smaller nation's leader is illegitimate, the method can look like justice, or it can look like conquest. In the comments, answer this one question with reasons. Was this law enforcement or regime change by another name? Because the way we label it today becomes the precedent someone else will use tomorrow.